Hey everyone, how's it going? So I wanted to talk about The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 2, The Return, the special that actually came out last night. I do want to break down the whole episode and talk about everything that happened in here. Obviously, we saw Melissa McBride and Norman Reedus return to Alexandria, return to the Commonwealth, and a lot of other places. And so, yeah, I do want to talk about that, get my thoughts on the whole episode or special, I guess, overall. Really great, honestly. If you haven't watched it yet, I really recommend checking it out. Obviously, it came out yesterday at the same time as the premiere. I think on cable, actually, it aired right after the episode. I only watched it pretty late last night because I forgot about it, honestly. So here are my thoughts here on this episode. And if you remember, they actually did one for The Ones Who Live as well. I imagine for Dead City, they're probably going to do the same thing. It seems to be called The Return. It's just a series where you have, I guess, the characters from each spinoff coming back to these locations and talking about this and that and what all of this meant and what they remember. So again, I think for Dead City, they'll probably do the same thing as well. And then I think it'll probably be done at that point. Maybe they do something more when everyone eventually all reunites, but yeah, I thought this was really incredible. So before going further, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. I will be doing a video breaking down the opening credit sequence. I want to go through everything shot by shot and talk about everything that was revealed there, and then talk a lot about episode 2 and also some moments from episode 1 as well, because there is the mysterious character that I actually think is going to be a pretty big villain this season. But in this special, we do see Norman Reedus and Melissa McBride return to Alexandria. Actually, at first, they returned to the Commonwealth, and it was really cool to see them return to the Commonwealth. I don't think they really felt that nostalgic about being there because the Commonwealth was very new. And I mean, obviously going back to Alexandria, going back to some of the older sets, that's going to be a little bit more special, right? Because those moments were very iconic. The Commonwealth arc to me wasn't really, some parts seemed really exciting, but overall, I think that the arc was pretty underwhelming. And I think it basically played out the same exact way in the show. So to me, a lot of the Commonwealth stuff, I think was just kind of, I mean, it is what it was, right? Like even at the very end, you know, they kind of went from the very beginning of the story, talked about that and really talked about every single arc from season 1 all the way to season 11. But even when they got to season 11, they didn't really talk about that too much. They basically just went straight to the very ending there where Carol and Daryl said goodbye. The one thing that we did learn is that Gimple talks about the origins of Pooky, and he actually says that he doesn't really know where it came from. It was just something that, you know, he was thinking of like, well, what sort of nickname would Carol call Daryl? And he just kind of thought of it as like, you know, it's sort of like, you know, you're poking somebody, like she's poking him kind of thing. So Pooky, like something like that. I don't know. And honestly, like Norman Reedus and Melissa McBride are just like, wait, what? And they just kind of laugh about it because it really became such a big thing back in the day. Like honestly, everyone was saying it back then. So it was just kind of really hilarious. But that happened really early on, I believe, in season 4. They did talk about the Cherokee Rose moment, and they really, I think, got the point down where they were saying that, like, this was the moment where Daryl and Carol are now a story, right? Like, I think before that, and I kind of talked about that too a little bit in my review, but you know, before this moment happened, like before the Cherokee Rose moment happened, it was all about sort of the main storyline. And yes, Sophia was missing and this and that, but all the characters were just side characters and they all sort of had a story here and there, or they mostly just had moments and like interactions. But the main story was really Rick, Shane, Lori, and I guess Carl, but really it was just Rick, Shane, and Lori. And as soon as this moment happened here with the Cherokee Rose, everyone realized, oh, Daryl and Carol, they're a story as well. And they're separate from the rest of the group. There's something else here, right? And I honestly felt the same way when I first saw that. So it's just really incredible. They actually go by this place called Cherokee Rose Lake, which I don't know if that's a real place or they just sort of called it that because that's where they filmed the location. I'm not entirely sure. But Melissa McBride, she thought the Cherokee Rose scene was very beautiful. And the one thing that we learned too in terms of, you know, the script and the way it was written was apparently the way that Norman Reedus actually said it and the story that he tells during that scene, that was Norman Reedus just telling the story because he didn't memorize the lines or anything like that word for word, but he just remembered the story, so he just sort of told the story. And so I liked the way he told the story. I thought that it was very real, and again, dialogue like that I think is just absolutely incredible. And Carol telling Daryl, you know, that he did more for Sophia than her dad ever did, and Norman Reedus said that everyone wanted Daryl to be a lot more like Merle, but he wanted a lot more for Daryl. He didn't want him to just become his brother. Like, he wanted it to be like, you know what, maybe that's his backstory, and maybe he was a lot like his brother, but like he's always sort of hated that part about himself and he's always wanted to change, right? And so obviously meeting Carol, meeting all these new people, he's starting to change now, and he is a different person. He's not that person, right? And so I'm so happy that Norman Reedus fought for that change, because if Daryl ended up just like Merle, I mean, honestly, that'd be really unfortunate. I also like the line that Melissa McBride says here. Like, she says that the show is about the people that you love dying and you surviving. I think that is the perfect way to describe The Walking Dead. It's everyone that you love is dying around you, and for some reason you're still surviving, right? Like, a lot of that plays a role into, Clear as well, because Morgan says, I don't remember exactly what he says word for word, but it was something about the weak inheriting the earth and whatnot, and it is definitely very true, but I mean, I guess there is obviously different aspects to that. I think that Morgan wasn't in the right mindset. It's true in a way. I think if you survive this long, you obviously are, I would say, a stronger person. But what Melissa McBride said here, I thought was the perfect way to describe The Walking Dead. It is really about that. It's about the people you love dying and you surviving. They also referenced a few other moments I thought was kind of cool. They talk about the prison scene, and Daryl says, light it up. I totally forgot that whole scene happened. The Cherokee Rose scene, I forgot that this even happened as well, because Daryl thought that Carol was dead, and so he put the rose there, and then obviously later on he learns that she's alive, but I totally forgot that happened. Like, I literally totally forgot that happened. And Norman Reedus talked about the whole thing of Rick, I guess banishing Carol, away from the group, and Daryl was very unhappy about that. And, they showed a lot of scenes from the episodes. I totally forgot a lot of that happened. I remembered it as I was watching, but for Daryl, he was definitely very, very unhappy with Rick that he would even do such a thing. And I do really like the fact that Daryl would respond in that way. And that's why I like the fact that Carol in episode 1 lied to Ash about Sophia's death. I think moments like that, honestly, are just absolutely important for The Walking Dead. I don't want all of them to get along. Going back to season 9 when Rick and Daryl weren't getting along, obviously they both are like, they're family and they understand everything, but they're not getting along in that moment. And then you also have Maggie and Michonne. They were arguing and stuff, and they really, honestly, that's sort of where things left off. And even after that, things got really bad. We like all these characters together because obviously all these characters together are just really incredible. But if it wasn't for the apocalypse and this was the real world, I don't think a lot of these characters would hang out with each other, right? It's the apocalypse that brought them together, and it's just you have a lot of these, different people, totally different personalities that, they know how to survive together, and they've become family, and that's what's made The Walking Dead so special. There's a lot of drama, a lot of stuff that happens here and there, and that's why I like moments like this where Daryl's getting really upset with Rick. They also talk about Daryl and Beth. So, there was that. They also talk about the Grove, and Norman Reedus does say that. There's all of these moments and all these really awesome moments throughout the series that everyone celebrates and talks about. I think for Daryl, I don't know what his most iconic moment would be. I'm trying to think, out of all the moments throughout the entirety of, the existence of the character, what would be his number one moment? Obviously, Merle's death is up there, but I don't really know. It's kind of hard to say. The Cherokee Rose moment was up there as well, but I don't know if I would say that was number one. He's had a lot of great moments, but I think for Carol, you could really point it out pretty easily, and that's the Grove, right? She's had really incredible moments afterwards, but the Grove, that episode, and it's because the episode is so powerful that it's so obvious that is her best moment of all time, and I don't think anything's ever going to top it. I really think that moment is going to be iconic forever, because that episode, just on its own, and I talked about this episode recently, it's such a great episode, and the fact that Carol is really the star of that episode as well, I just think that it really is going to be Carol's all-time moment forever. When we look back, in 40, 50 years from now, everyone's going to be saying that was Carol's best moment of all time. But they also talk about Carol's big save in season 5, episode 1, which was definitely very cool. I still remember watching all of that and being so excited. I was wondering how they were going to get out of that. I saw the trailer for season 5 and it looked absolutely insane. And I was just I don't know how they're going to escape this situation. Something's going to have to happen. And then obviously Carol being there, it was just perfect because, and then you got Carol and Daryl's reunion because Carol was gone for so long. So it sort of connects to what happened earlier in season 4 with Karen and David. She finally came back and she helped out the group, right? And it was such an amazing moment. Honestly, when you watch that reunion scene there between Carol and Daryl, and it's not even between Carol and Daryl because obviously that's such a big moment, but it really is with Carol and everyone else. Rick is there as well, and everyone is just so happy to see Carol, and Rick, you can just tell he feels so awful, right? And you just cry every time you watch that scene. So honestly, everyone was so happy to see Carol there. But yeah, they talk about, when they first got to Alexandria, they actually visit Alexandria, and they talk about a lot of the, I guess, what it was like filming, for the first time in Alexandria, because it was very different from filming out in the woods all the time and surviving in places like that, right? Now they were actually in a place where, they had houses and stuff and everyone was dressing nice. And for Norman Reedus, he was like, well, I mean, obviously Daryl didn't really dress up nice or anything like that. And I totally forgot that that was an aspect of the story because yes, there was, that whole dinner party or whatever that happened there. And Daryl didn't even go inside. He was watching, from outside and just kind of seeing what it was like, but he didn't want to, get close to anybody. He didn't really want to accept this new way of life, right? I think he was definitely smart to do that, looking back at it all now. And the Wolves, I will say, I forgot how brutal, I guess is the word I would say. Like, they were definitely a very brutal and vicious group. Like, literally, you see some of the scenes when they attacked Alexandria. Like, I wasn't expecting that. Honestly, they're a very underrated group. They also talk about the Saviors. They talk about a lot of, I guess, the kingdom and whatnot, because they actually go stand in front of the kingdom, or at least the doors to the kingdom, and they talk about Andrew Lincoln leaving. Norman said it was really sad, and obviously they missed him because it was just different with him gone. And Melissa says, she understood like why he had to go, but it was sad to see him go. And they also all thought that it was sort of, it was also very exciting for a lot of other characters because now they were going to get a lot more of the spotlight with Rick Grimes like off the show, right? And I definitely, I think we all talked about that back then as well. Like, well, now if Rick's going to be gone, you're going to have other characters as well, I guess, sort of, in a way. I mean, obviously, you're going to have a lead character in some way. I think the way they handled it, honestly, was perfect. It wasn't one person who became Rick Grimes. It was sort of everybody became a leader, right? So I like the way they handle it overall. They talk about Carol having longer hair, in the later episodes, which was very different. The Whisperer Pike scene. I feel like the way The Walking Dead is talked about in general, a lot of people don't reference the Whisperer Pike scene, but looking back at it now, that's a very iconic moment. If that happened in the first 4 or 5 seasons, people would reference that moment all the time. But when you go back to watch that scene, and I talked about it back then as well, like, that's going to be a very memorable moment forever. It's a very iconic moment. Like, Daryl's just saying, like, just look at me, this and that. And there's a bunch of references there to obviously when Sophia died, and the music as well. It's just, it reminds me of classic horror, and the shock of the scene. The Whisperers were so threatening that season. Again, season 9 is like, it really could be the best season of The Walking Dead. I feel like for nostalgia, I always say season 4 or 5, but like season 9 could be up there. If Rick was a part of that season, like he was for the first 5 episodes, but if he was there for the Whisperers the entire time and he saw the Whisperer Pike scene, that season would be the #1 season of all time, easily. I could easily say that. That's how incredible season 9 is. Like, if Rick was actually there the entire time, if Carl was there the entire time as well, like, imagine how great season 9 would have been. I think it's still up there. It's definitely a really amazing season. Like, it's definitely in my top 2 or top 3 seasons of all time. But if Rick was there, I think that, man, that season easily would be like the #1 best season of all time. But yeah, for the rest of the special, they talk about a lot of what happens afterwards. Carol coming back from being out at sea, the friendship bracelets and whatnot. They talked about, the Whisper arc. Norman Reedus said that Alpha was his favorite villain. Carol letting Negan out as well. Daryl was never going to do it, and obviously a lot of people disagreed with it, but Carol did. And yeah, they talked about the Commonwealth. A lot of the talk here, I think, was sort of rushed, at least when they got to the Commonwealth arc anyways, because there wasn't really a lot to say. I think that the Commonwealth arc it's a very, very underwhelming arc, I would say. The Whisperer arc was so incredible, and then you had the bonus episodes, which just really weren't the best. And I mean, obviously you had a couple episodes that were really great, but I just think that they weren't overall the best. And then season 11 started off very strong, and there were still really great moments here and there throughout that season, but I just think the overall Commonwealth arc wasn't the best. And so yeah, I kind of get why they didn't really talk about it too much, because the ending was the most exciting, with Daryl and Carol, wanting to go look for Rick and Michonne, or I guess Daryl doing that and then Carol staying behind. And then they talk about France, and they actually kind of talk about episode 1 as well, which is really cool. So in terms of my overall review of this, I will say it was really great to see them going back to Alexandria, going back to a lot of different locations. I think that they could have done a better job, though, of like maybe going to see other props and whatnot. Like, I think the way they talked about the show overall was better than The Ones Who Lives, The Return, right? Like, I think Andrew Lincoln and Denai Guerrera talking about the show and whatnot was really cool, but they didn't really go through everything like Melissa McBride and Norman Reedus did. So I kind of preferred, this version of it, but I did prefer The Ones Who Lives, The Return, in the sense that they actually went back and they looked at old props, and they were looking at, different places here and there, and they actually like walked around more. I felt like this one here was much more of a conversation. They didn't really go look at a lot of stuff. So I think there's pros and cons to both, but both were really great overall, and I'm excited to see Dead Cities. I hope that they definitely get into it a lot more, go visit some really awesome locations and stuff, and really showcase a lot of that, because I felt like in the Daryl Dixon one, I mean, yes, they talked about all these moments, but they didn't really say too much of like, okay, so here is where we filmed this. Like, yeah, they did say that, but in The Ones Who Lives the Return, they were always talking about, oh, I remember this, like here we did this here, this was filmed here, you know, like I like stuff like that. So yeah, very cool to see. But I'm gonna leave it here. Definitely post all your thoughts down below. Post your review of this. Did you watch it? If you haven't, if you've totally forgot about it, I mean, I forgot about it as well. So yeah, definitely go and check it out. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.